My heels clicked softly against the polished marble of my office floor, echoing in a space far larger than the one I used to dream about back in college. The New York skyline stretched out behind me, golden light spilling across my desk, catching the edge of the framed photographs I kept there, reminders of the woman I had built myself into. On the surface, I looked every bit the composed professional: silk blouse, hair pinned neatly back, lipstick still intact after a 10-hour day. But beneath all of that, there was a pulse of memory I couldn't quiet. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Ms. Reynolds? This is the University of Westbridge. We'd like to invite you back for a special ceremony. We're naming a hall in your honor." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. My university. The same place where I had been overlooked, humiliated, where my seat at graduation had been taken from me. I swiveled in my chair, staring out at the city, my chest tightening with a mixture of disbelief and irony. I could almost hear the crowd, the cheers, the scraping of metal chairs from that day. My hands curled into my lap, nails digging lightly into my palm. A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. They took my seat at graduation, and now they want to put my name on a building. The universe has a strange sense of humor. I was 22 the day it happened. The air inside the university gymnasium was heavy with the scent of polished wood floors and fresh carnations arranged along the stage. Rows of chairs stretched in neat lines, each marked with a name card. Mine should have been near the front, where I had earned it, valedictorian of the graduating class. I remember smoothing the hem of my simple white dress, hands trembling with a nervous excitement. My mother's pearl bracelet clinked softly against my wrist, a gift from my grandmother when she told me, "Claire, don't let anyone dim your light." Those words had carried me through 4 grueling years of late-night study sessions and part-time jobs that barely paid rent. But when I approached the stage, I saw it. My seat was gone. Another student, a trustee's son, sat where my name card should have been. His robe was pressed, his smile confident. He didn't even glance at me. My heart dropped into my stomach, heat rising in my chest. I hurried to one of the faculty members. "Excuse me, I think there's been a mistake. That's my seat." Her lips tightened. "Claire, we've made some last-minute adjustments." The board felt it was appropriate to highlight certain families. My throat burned. Appropriate? After everything? After 4 years of clawing my way up, balancing 2 jobs, tutoring half the freshman dorms just to afford tuition? I stood frozen, clutching my program until the edges bent beneath my fingers. The applause swelled as the dean stepped to the podium, calling names that weren't mine. I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes, not one of them noticing the girl pushed to the shadows. When they called the class valedictorian, it wasn't me. I don't remember the speech. I don't remember the faces. I just remember the sound of my own heartbeat, loud and hollow in my ears. I slipped outside before the ceremony ended, the cool air cutting against my flushed cheeks. That night, sitting on the thin mattress in my cramped apartment, I unclasped my grandmother's bracelet and stared at it in my palm. Every word she had ever spoken to me echoed, "You don't need their permission to shine." So I made myself a promise. If they wouldn't give me a seat at their table, I would build my own. Bigger. Stronger. And no one, not a board, not a family name, not even an institution, would ever be able to take it away from me again. That was the night I stopped waiting for permission. The weeks after graduation felt like walking barefoot across broken glass. Everyone else posted smiling photos in their caps and gowns, tossing hats into the air, framed by proud families. I avoided social media, unable to watch. Instead, I clocked in at the small bookstore where I worked evenings, alphabetizing shelves until my fingers were numb. By day, I took whatever internships I could land. Unpaid, grueling, endless coffee runs. Nobody cared that I had graduated top of my class. Nobody knew. The university hadn't even corrected the record. But I carried that bracelet with me every day, tucked inside my pocket, cool against my palm whenever the weight of invisibility threatened to crush me. Then came Mrs. Parker. She was the senior editor at a small but respected publishing house in Manhattan. I had delivered her coffee for weeks without saying a word, until one afternoon she caught me scribbling notes in the margins of a manuscript. "You know this isn't your job, right?" she said, adjusting her glasses, her voice sharper than her age-softened frame suggested. Flustered, I apologized, ready to lose even the unpaid position. But instead of scolding me, she tilted her head. "You have a good eye. Who taught you to edit like this?" I swallowed hard. No one. I just noticed things. That was the first time someone looked at me and saw more than a delivery girl. She began giving me small assignments. First, proofreading chapters. Then, offering feedback. I stayed up nights in my tiny studio, fueled by cheap coffee and stubbornness, combing through pages until the words blurred. There were failures.
Plenty.
A botched proposal. An author furious at my suggestions. Days when I questioned if I was fooling myself. I cried into my pillow more times than I'd admit. But slowly, wins began to stack up. The first author who asked for me by name. The first check that paid more than my rent. The first night I bought groceries without counting every dollar twice. Still, I kept my success quiet. My family never asked and I never offered. On social media, I posted modest updates, a coffee cup, a blurred skyline, the inside of a cab. Nothing that hinted at the empire I was quietly building. Because an empire it was becoming. By my late 20s, I wasn't just editing, I was representing authors, negotiating contracts, and eventually launching my own literary agency. I signed clients no one believed in, the ones other agents dismissed, and turned their manuscripts into bestsellers. Each deal felt like another brick in the seat I was building for myself. One they could never take away. I rented my first office. Small, drafty, with peeling paint, but it was mine. I hung my grandmother's bracelet in a shadow box on the wall, a reminder of where I'd started. And then came the moment that changed everything. One of my clients, a debut author I'd fought tooth and nail to represent, landed a multi-million-dollar deal with a major publisher. Her book topped every chart. My agency's name was suddenly on everyone's lips. I had gone from the girl shoved out of her seat to the woman people scrambled to sit beside. But no one from my university knew. Not yet. I kept it hidden, all of it, the penthouse apartment, the growing staff, the bank account that no longer trembled at zero. Because some part of me wanted the reveal to be cinematic, undeniable. And when the call finally came, the one inviting me back to Westbridge, I knew the curtain was about to rise. The black sedan pulled slowly through the arched gates of Westbridge University. It had been more than a decade since I last set foot on this campus, but the sight of its ivy-covered stone buildings made my chest tighten. I smoothed my skirt with a steady hand, though my heart pounded harder than it had in years. The driver opened my door, and a camera flash exploded instantly. I hadn't expected the press, but apparently the university had. "Ms. Reynolds," voices called. "Claire, how does it feel to be honored by your alma mater?" My alma mater. The phrase tasted strange on my tongue. As I walked across the familiar quad, memories pressed in like shadows, the sound of my heels clicking on this same pavement, my breath catching when I realized my seat was gone. But now the whispers weren't pity. They were awe. Inside the grand hall, banners stretched from ceiling to floor, the Reynolds Hall of Literature and Arts. My name, in bold gold lettering, draped across the walls that had once ignored me. A university trustee greeted me with a wide smile, his handshake too firm, too rehearsed. "Claire, we're so proud to have you back. Your accomplishments, extraordinary. You're an inspiration to our students." I studied his face, trying to remember if he had been there the day my seat was stolen. I couldn't be sure, but the irony wasn't lost on me. The ceremony began with speeches, deans, faculty, even students I didn't recognize. Their words painted me as some shining success story born from Westbridge's nurturing soil. I sat there in my tailored navy suit, heels crossed neatly at the ankle, my lips curled into a polite smile. If only they knew. And then it was my turn. Walking to the podium, I could feel every eye in the room following me. Some faces were familiar. Old professors, a few classmates. I spotted Hannah Davis, the student who had once whispered to me, "You deserved that seat more than anyone." Her eyes were wide now, glassy, with disbelief. I placed my notes down, though I didn't need them. My voice, when it came, was steady. Standing here today feels surreal. Some of you might remember me. Most probably don't. I was the girl who worked 2 jobs, who kept her head down, who wasn't born into the kind of family names etched on these walls. I was also the girl whose seat at graduation was taken. A ripple moved through the audience. Murmurs. Shifts in posture. My words landed like stones in still water. I let the silence breathe before continuing. That day, I walked out of this very hall believing I was invisible. Believing my hard work, my sacrifices, my worth could be erased with a single decision. But invisibility has a way of becoming fire. And fire, once lit, doesn't go out quietly. I told them, not every detail, but enough about starting from nothing, about the long nights, about the first book deal that changed everything. I didn't need to boast. The facts spoke for themselves. When I looked up, I caught sight of the trustee's son, the one who had sat in my seat all those years ago. He was older now, his suit tighter, his jaw set. But his eyes flicked down when they met mine. My grandmother once told me, "You don't need their permission to shine." She was right. And so today, as I stand in this hall named after me, I want every student sitting in the shadows to hear this. No one has the power to take away your seat. Not forever. Not if you refuse to surrender it in your heart. Applause erupted, filling the chamber. Some stood, clapping until their palms must have stung. Others sat frozen, faces pale. I stepped away from the podium, my pulse thrumming with something I hadn't felt since that night long ago. Vindication, yes, but also peace. Because in that moment, I wasn't the girl who lost her seat. I was the woman who built a hall. The ceremony ended with champagne flutes clinking and cameras flashing, but the real moments came after the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned. That's when the people who had once ignored me suddenly remembered my name. Professor Allen, my old academic advisor, approached first. His hair had thinned, his voice softer now. "Claire," he said, almost sheepishly, "you've done remarkably well for yourself." I'm sorry, I didn't fight harder for you back then." I studied him for a beat. He had been kind once, but timid, the kind of man who avoided conflict, even at the expense of fairness. "Professor," I said evenly, "the best apology is action. Make sure no other student gets overlooked the way I was. Speak up, even when it costs you." His lips pressed together, and he nodded. Then came the trustee's son. His suit was immaculate, but there was a nervous sheen on his forehead. "Claire," he began, a forced laugh in his voice. "Water under the bridge, right? I mean, we were kids." "No," I cut in, my tone calm but sharp. "We weren't kids. We were adults. And you knew what that seat represented. You took it anyway." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "I don't need your apology. What I want is your contribution. Fund scholarships for students who don't have family names or wealth to carry them. Quietly, anonymously. Do that, and maybe one day you'll understand what it feels like to give someone a chance rather than steal it." His face flushed crimson, but he swallowed hard and nodded. Finally, my parents approached. My father shifting uncomfortably, my mother clutching her purse, as if it might anchor her. They hadn't supported me much after high school, always reminding me that connections matter more than hard work. When I called crying after graduation, they told me to move on. Now, their eyes darted around the ornate lobby, taking in the plaques, the gold lettering of my name. Pride and shame battled silently in their faces. "Claire," my mother said softly, "we're proud of you. Truly." I inhaled slowly, measuring my words. I spent years craving those words. Now, I don't need them. But if you truly want to be part of my life, here's my condition. Respect my journey. No more dismissing what you don't understand. And no more silence when I need your voice. They both nodded, tears glimmering in my mother's eyes. As I stood there, heels firm on the marble floor, I realized the shift wasn't just about power. It was about choice. For the first time, I wasn't begging for acknowledgement or waiting for permission. I was setting the terms. Some of those terms were firm, some forgiving, but all of them were mine. Because power isn't about revenge. It's about redefining the rules so the next girl, the next Claire Reynolds standing in the shadows, doesn't have to fight quite so hard just to be seen. And that, more than the gold letters on the wall, felt like victory. The crowd eventually dispersed, and the echoes of applause faded into the stillness of the campus night. I walked out into the cool air, the faint hum of cicadas filling the silence. The banners with my name fluttered against the stone walls, golden letters shimmering beneath the glow of lantern lights. I paused at the steps of Reynolds Hall, my heels clicking softly as I leaned against the railing. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let myself feel it. Not the grandeur, not the honor, but the quiet recognition of a wound that had finally healed. The people I confronted earlier lingered in my mind. Professor Allen, determined now to do better. The trustee's son, humbled for perhaps the first time. My parents, finally beginning to see me for who I was rather than who they wished I'd been. Change wouldn't come overnight. I knew that. But the seeds had been planted. And sometimes that's enough. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small velvet pouch I'd carried for years. Inside was my grandmother's bracelet, the one that had been with me on the day I lost my seat. Its pearls caught the moonlight, glowing softly in my palm. I slipped it onto my wrist, fastening the delicate clasp. Her voice came back to me, as clear as if she were standing there beside me. "Claire, you don't need their permission to shine." Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes, but they weren't from pain anymore. They were from gratitude. For her words. For my resilience. For the fire that injustice had sparked inside me. I turned back toward the hall, my name gleaming above the doors. Once, I had been denied a chair in this place. Now, an entire building carried my story. And as I walked away into the night, my heels steady on the stone path, one truth rang louder than the silence around me. They took my seat at graduation. But I built a throne no one can take away.